At what point do you become underrated, properly rated, or overrated? That is the discussion and more on episode 176 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore, my guy, my co-host, like always, Kyle Jessie, the new executive editor of Bassmaster.com, running the ship down there in Birmingham. My guy, Kyle Jessie. And Kyle, that's the topic today. Congratulations on your promotion, by the way. If anyone's seen social media, my guy is moving up in the world and gets to be on Bass Live this coming week for Logan Martin. But the question is, when does Kyle Jessie go from underrated to overrated? No, I'm just kidding. When do anglers remove themselves from the underrated situation to being properly rated? And what are those criteria? And we're going to get into that on this episode of the podcast. So that's my question to you. What's the
Well,
definition?
first off, before we get into that, it's not just me. James Hall, being the content director for both Edit and the digital team. So major props to James.
James has been around plenty. We can't give him any kudos on the
Well,
podcast, you know.
I'm just as excited for him to be in the role he's in, because he's gonna be able to help me a ton, and has helped me a ton over the years. So to say I'm running the ship would probably be a little far fetched, but definitely excited about the promotion, and thrilled that Bass is giving me the opportunity. But to answer the question, I think you could go a lot of different routes, and that's the thing. This is kind of a moving target. Everybody has a different perspective of who's underrated. I mean, you could say somebody that is well accomplished and been doing this for a really long time is underrated just based on their standards. So, it's kind of an opinion based question in a lot of ways. And, when you posed the question on your social media, it was interesting because names reached all over the place. Like, there was guys that you kind of feel like maybe haven't proven it consistently enough that were mentioned. And then there's guys that have proven it so much and gotten the recognition that it's like, I don't know if you can call them underrated anymore.
Yep.
For me personally, I would say it's basically when the recognition that the guy gets nationally, across all publications, across all media, fans, things of that nature, doesn't match what he's accomplished. And I think that you see that a lot, because obviously in the sport of bass fishing, and especially in the Elite Series, even now in the EQs, there's so many talented anglers. Like, that tier that you want to rank them, like, it's very difficult. And obviously we know that there's rankings out there, and some fairly accurate, some fairly not. Fairly not, I don't know what that means, but some not. Let's just put it that way.
And we're not, and you haven't mentioned any names, and I'm not mentioning any names in this definition portion, because that'll be what we're going to get into in a moment. But I do feel there's a couple components to it. It's like time fished, not overall, but at this level. Like, you can be underrated on the opens because you're brand new to the opens from the college series. So you haven't fished the opens long enough to be properly rated against that level of competition. You get to the Elite Series. There's a window where we're going to talk about you because you're a new guy. But then how long do you have success? You kind of have to have like a little bit of a time aspect to it. You have to have proven yourself or competed at this level for a little bit. And then, is it victories? Is it consistency? Is it showing up in the big moments like the Classic, where we've got guys who win classics but don't win Elite Series events, guys who win Elite Series events but don't win AOYs? Where is that deal? And one thing that I think is a common thread with our guests today that we'll have two different anglers on. The common thread is, when you think of that angler, or you think of a body of water, maybe the whole schedule, you really don't know which one to avoid them. Like, you could pick them in all of those tournaments and feel confident, like, if all of those lakes fit their style or a style they can morph into. And that is where I feel like, because they're consistent, they can be a big performer and show up. They have the ability, they travel well, and they've been around for a few years where they've stacked good finishes to prove it to us. So there's a couple components on that. And we're gonna have two guests on today that were highly commented names in that post from the fans on my post about that. And I was like, you know what? They kind of fit the bill. They've been around for a good while. They've established themselves as a professional fisherman. They don't have a tremendous amount of victories or top level finishes maybe, but they're always, wow, he got 2 or 3 top 10s this year and got 15th in points. Like we're either talking about the guys who are the last 10 in the classic or the top 10 in AOY, but those other 30 in the middle, you just might not get talked about if you didn't win. So Kyle, that is the deal today. And I will pitch that to you. You get to for the B&W trailer hitches question of the day. And I tried this the other day, but I'm going to get it. I think I got it dialed in so you can see it clearly. Let's see. Let me turn down the brightness on my computer and see if it'll focus on me. Maybe it won't. But anyways, it
That's the
says
closest. That's the
it's the
closest we've ever
closest
been.
it's getting. It's getting. So it says, which Bassmaster Lead Series angler comes to mind when the ability chart is maxed out or near the top, but the recognition is only 1 or 2 notches from the bottom? And so, do you have an angler or two? Think about them, because I'm going to ask you your opinion in just a second, and then we're going to get those anglers who were mentioned. We can't, our 2 guests today, so you can briefly mention them, but we'll save those kudos for when we get to talk to them. But today's episode is brought to you by B&W Trailer Hitches, the go-to solution for all your towing needs. From hauling your boat to the lake, to the mower, to the shop, B&W has you covered with their top-of-the-line tow and stow adjustable ball mount. It's not your average ball mount. With this adjustable height, multiple options, it's like a Swiss Army knife for your truck. And here's the best part. When you're not towing, the tow and stow flips around, stows right behind your truck bumper, and is out of the way for your shins and your garage door. So we appreciate B&W Trailer Hitches jumping in with us on the podcast, and they are the question of the day. Kyle, Jessie, I throw it to you. Who's an angler that comes to mind when you think of talent off the charts or near the top, and recognition near the bottom?
So obviously, I won't say either of the 2 guests today because I think both of them fit the category perfectly. I think that's a huge part of the reason they're going to join us today to kind of discuss that. But another name that got thrown around a lot that I agree with is Shane LaHue. Shane LaHue is so consistent, and it goes back to the exact point you made earlier with like, from a fantasy fishing standpoint, when you're thinking of places to choose Shane LaHue, like it's easy when we go to Murray or like, a Carolina lake where you think, well, that like really, really, really matches his strong suit. But it's like he's got strong finishes pretty much everywhere we go. I mean, like I can just sit back and think of the amount of times I've covered him in various different environments, types of body of water, states, you name it, all over the place. Makes the classic literally every year. I mean, Shane LaHue to me would be one of those guys that might be underrated. And when you think of underrated too, another thing to keep in mind is like perception is everything when it comes to ratings. And I think some guys are a little more, when I say quiet, I mean like not like overly social media heavy, overly certain
100%.
things that equip to that. And that's not even a bad thing or anything. But I think Shane LaHue is certainly one of them. Again, our 2 guests today certainly fit the bill. But if I had to select another one, I know Lester is a name we've thrown out in the past, but I think
Man,
we're
I was gonna get into that.
that.
I know. I think I
Like,
was gonna. I
that
think I'll say that 3 guys that maybe are listed or would have been on this list that have removed themselves from it would be Brandon Lester. He's got 2 wins now, ever so consistent. He's going to be a safe pick in fantasy. When it's a bad year, it's a random year. And then Brock Mosley and Luke Palmer. I think their victories this past season, the 2023 year, removed them from it because they had done so well and stacked consistency. And we were like, when's their breakthrough going to happen so that we can trust them to close it out? They get their victories. And now we're like, no, they've jumped into that tier of being properly rated, or we think of them much quicker when we think of a lake and how it sets up.
certainly, and I'm sitting here looking at the elite roster, and again, you could make an argument for a lot of guys. But when you even jump into that other tier, like a guy like Drew Cook is extremely well versed. Like it's not that he gets no attention, that's not the case, but it's like when there's levels to it, you're like, I don't think people still truly understand how good like a guy like Drew Cook is as far as consistency across the board. And another thing that comes to play there, with rating and perception of an angler is when they're strong suit is really, really strong. It's almost like we as fans people of the sport want to pigeonhole them into being so good at that. Like one thing, like with Drew Cook, it'd be sight fishing,
Yeah.
pre-spawn, spawn,
You
that
only
time period.
bring him up in that time period.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just not accurate because he's so good all the time. Again, I don't necessarily think he's an underrated angler. I think people, certainly know Drew Cook. But another name that came to mind was Bob Downey. I think that was a name that
He's
got
getting
brought
there.
up
Yeah.
a decent bit, of course. Um, he's been so consistent, and again, it's kind of the same way. Like when you're making fantasy picks, every time I see his name in a bucket, it's like you can't justify not picking him. Like, and it's not that I always select him, but it's one of those guys that a lot of times his player percentage, which, you know, you could honestly throw into the ratings factor. Like that's a lot of times what people think of certain anglers is like their player percentage on fantasy. It's never like incredibly high, but it's like he's always a good value pick. So that's one of those things that like probably on the underrated scale, I would say.
And I'd say some of those Midwestern guys, Pat Schlapper, Jay Shakir, Bob Downey, don't talk about Austin Felix. All four of those people were mentioned in the comments, 197 Instagram comments about people. I would say that, yeah, if they're not self-promotion guys, they're going to be more underrated because unless they just win. Brian Schmidt's one that for as much as he has won, he's not talked about as much, but if you were in the studio, we know, like yeah, he's there. There's a reason he was on camera day one at Harris Chain. Like we expect those things. Some guys that I would put in that character, they fit the category of the guys we're gonna have on a guest today. Because I think Jay Shakir's a great one, but he is very young in his career still. Like he's had plenty of years and he's shown us in different bodies of water. So I'm okay with that. But he's barely been here long enough to be in there. Anybody less than him
Service
is yeah.
service time is important. It is to your
Yes.
credit. It is very important.
And so I think that when you think of Kenta Kimura and Steve Kennedy, Kenta's been in the States for 20 years. He's been on the Opens for a long time. We know of Kenta. He came to the elites, had a tough year, and then has great years. I think that he's getting to that point where he's not talked about enough. And then Steve Kennedy, there was a time where he was, in the early 2010s, probably talked about a lot more, but he is still one of those guys. A lot of guys brought up rookies, and I just said we've talked about them actually like way more. And yes, they're on a hot streak, but we honestly like have given the rookies overall so much love. They've only had 4 events. Let's let it play out a little bit. Every rookie that's doing well this year half of them may have a step back next year and have a sophomore slump. Like you got to let them get through 2 years. Let's bring in our guest, our first guest. So these two guys, we mentioned it, Matt Arey and Brandon Card. Both have been around for a while. Arey for the Elite since 2019, Card on the Elite since like 2013. But Matt Arey is a 17-year pro, and I think that he fits the bill perfectly of someone who brings it every time, but is not on people's short list like he should be. Mr. Matt Arey, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. Where are you at? You shooting a turkey? You got a camo hat on.
No, well, no, it's got too much yellow in it for turkey hunting, man. They can see that stuff right there. No, I'm actually sitting up here at the barn. I just got done loading some trash, getting ready to head to the dump, but was going to talk to you guys first. I'm knocking out some honeydews. I got to go. Emily took the girls to school this morning, let me go turkey hunting, and now I'm back to honeydews.
Well, we have you on today because we think you're one of the most underrated anglers, and a lot of fans think the same thing. They picked you for that. So you saw the social media post about that. I'd say now that Emily would probably say you're an underrated husband because you're doing all these honeydews. Like that's underrated. Like a boy, you leave for Murray in a few days, so atta boy. But when you saw that post, and you probably got tagged in comments when people tagged your page, what was your first thought? What was your first thought when you saw that I fit that category, or like, man, I've always desired to be mentioned with the Christies or Hackneys, guys who have removed themselves from that because you've stapled out a good career so far.
Yeah, I mean, humbling, honestly. But overall, it's nice to be recognized from that aspect of it, from the ability aspect of it. I think that my career hadn't been filled with a bunch of giant wins and things like that. Just making championships, and consistency, and it is nice to have that recognized, just because I think I've been, I don't know exactly, 15 years now, maybe 14 years, and haven't missed a tour championship, something like that. It's the FLW Tour Championship. I think I made 9 or 10 in a row, and then I came over to the Legion and had to cross my fingers, knock on wood, I haven't missed a classic yet since I've been over here. So I don't want to. I do play more of a conservative game, I think, and that might have a lot to do with not being, recognized more often. As far as from a television standpoint, the media standpoint, but and I play that game just because it's what works for me. There's a lot of guys, they approach this game differently, and you got to do what works for you. And if I can make championships every year without winning a tournament throughout the season, I would trade that off any day of the week, because Bassmaster Classic, there's nothing bigger, there's nothing better, and you definitely can't win it if you ain't in it.
Well, I want an honest answer here, because as a competitor, like, it's hard to not kind of not necessarily pay attention, but see people's comments and see, like, almost like the lack of recognition in certain areas. Like, it's kind of like, for like a baseball reference, if I'm hitting 650 and they're talking about the guy hitting 250, it's like, it's kind of crazy to reconcile with that. How often do you find yourself thinking, like, how are they not talking about me, like, in certain scenarios?
Well, it's not as much, Kyle, about why are they not talking about me. It might be more of why are they talking about him. So, I mean, I'm being blatantly honest. I just I get it though. Look, the game we play out here is not just about bass fishing. There's a lot of other things that go into the pot, and part of that is business, and I get that, and I understand why certain things go certain ways sometimes. I've been in this game long enough to know that it is a business, and we have to all run it to the best of our abilities. I'm an individual business. Bassmaster is an organization; they're a business. We have to do what's best for us, and I understand why it happens sometimes, but yeah, it's not that why am I not getting the attention. It's why maybe is that particular person getting the attention.
Well,
Fair enough.
I'll say this. I put it up on a tee. I said Matt Arey, dark horse, win the Bassmaster Classic at Grand Lake. And it was up to you. If you hit that sucker out, I mean, we could have pulled all the clips and it would have been a big deal. No, I kid with you, but that when you show up in those big moments, that's when people know you're a player. And oftentimes the classic memories or winning an Elite Series event carries in the memories for a lot of people. And so I know you've been close on B.A.S.S so far in a classic and in some elites. But do you think where you're from and where the lakes that have shaped you, the Carolinas, because when we look at the list, there's quite a few Carolinians on the Elite Series that were listed as being under it. Is that because where you're from lends to consistency all over the place? Because that was one of the things that me and Kyle said was when you think about a schedule and an angler, you don't really know when to pick them because you could pick them at any of the lakes. And that's kind of like, that guy's up here in our mind. We just got to figure out when he's going to come through and win.
Yeah, for sure, Ronnie. I mean, the Carolinas as well as anybody. And these lakes around here, they make you a very versatile angler. I've never been like, a Denny Breyer or a KVD with cranking or jerk baiting, like, got Cody Huff with forward facing sonar and a jig in mana, things like that. Like I've just always kind of tried to adapt the situation and do whatever it takes and never be afraid to do what it takes. There's a lot of stubbornness in fishing, and it usually, I've seen stubbornness end a lot of guys' careers early. And unfortunately, you know, that it comes down to how bad do you want it. You know what I mean? Like, are you going to open your mind up and do what the fish want you to do? Or are you just going to do what Ronnie Moore wants to do or Matt Arey wants to do all the time? Because obviously more often than not, that does not work. So being from the Carolinas definitely helps shape you as a very versatile angler if you allow it. Only if you allow it, though. I mean, I know a lot of guys my age, some younger, some older, they grew up around the Carolinas. 20 years ago, they were winning tournaments, skipping jigs under docks. That's what everybody was doing. They were skipping a half-ounce jig under docks, a hand-tied jig, maybe throwing a bladed jig a little bit right when it came out, stuff like that. But they're still trying to force that today. Everywhere they go, they're looking for that particular bite, and that doesn't work anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work anymore. Our fisheries have changed. Technology's changed. Techniques have changed. Baits have changed. Good gosh, man, the amount of baits that are out there on the market now, just to stay up to date. I'm always on Tackle Warehouse clicking on the what's new little logo over there on the left, because I'm scared to death I'm going to miss something and get my teeth kicked in at the next tournament off of, well, I mean, fuzzy dice and things like that. So,
the consistency aspect of it. It's what Ronnie kind of stole a question I was going to ask, but over the course of your career, you've been so consistent. And when you look at your angler page on Bassmaster.com and look at your finishes, that obviously shows up. But the one thing I was trying to do was figure out, if you had to say what style of tournament, what lake, what does Matt Arey not succeed in, it's hard to put your finger on just one style of tournament. For you personally, is there one type of tournament that you don't prefer as much, or is it just a matter of I've done this for so long, nothing really phases me at this point?
Maybe late June at Smith Lake in Alabama.
Hey, you won Beaver Lake. I am putting you on the team for Smith. I feel like that's gonna be,
Ronnie, that was March, brother.
Hey,
that's a big difference.
It looks the same. I just feel like that's a Matt Arey lake. But go ahead.
Far less boats on the water.
Yeah, I just said that. My worst B.A.S. finish was at the Sabine River, but I don't dislike that place. I actually like it. It offers a lot of options, and it's 100% on me when I bombed that tournament last year. But overall, Kyle, Florida, one particular lake in Florida, I've had some pretty good finishes at St. John's and Harris Chain, done okay at Toho, but Okeechobee has always gotten me. And Okeechobee, anywhere early in the year, January, February, I fished multiple tournaments down there. I've made one or two checks, but I just skimped out one or two checks, not like top 20s or anything. And down that lake, back when it was really healthy, and the lake had a just vast majority of it was vegetation, healthy lake, a lot of different areas to fish. I could never, because fishing down there spawn for 4 or 5 months out of the year, I could never figure out how many were coming and going. Because just about any time in January and February, I could get on a pre-spawn or a post-spawn or a spawn bite, and practice would be off the charts, and I'm excited and go through an area of Kissimmee grass flipping or out there. I vividly remember an FLW tour event I was practicing 4 years ago, and I was out there on Observation Shoal, and I was flipping. Basically, it was Kissimmee grass, and I was flipping a jig and had 35 bites the last day of practice, and caught a 6 and a 5, and shook off a couple more big ones, and caught some solid bucks. And I'm I'm getting ready to crush them, dude. And I went in there the first day, and I caught 40 flipping a jig, caught 40 flipping a jig, and had 9 pounds. And to this day, I can't explain that. I mean, if somebody could explain that to me, I would love to hear it. But my point is, it was a transition area. It wasn't necessarily as many spawning fish. It was just a transition from the outside of the shoal to the inside to where the fish were actually doing their thing. So I was man, I got the best of both worlds here. I got fish moving in, fish moving out, some spawning. And I just went in there, and I think I had 14 pounds the second day. I didn't get a check. I sucked in that tournament. But to this day, I can't explain that. Harris Chain's another one this year. I ended up 54th, but I got on a shad spawn deal the first day in Big Harris and caught 50. I think my marshal actually counted 51. I had more keepers registered than anybody on Bass Track that day, and I had 12 pounds. The second day I went out and caught 30. Running a chatterbait, swimming a jig, like Joe Webster and Wes Logan and a lot of those guys were doing. And I have not seen a 3-pounder yet. And I've caught 100 bass at the Harris Chain the week we were there, and I never saw a 3-pounder. That's God's honest truth. I never caught a 3-pounder. So I can't explain that. That Florida just, man, it's always a crapshoot for me. I can always get bites down there, but it's just, I don't know. I feel like a lost puppy, because you get dialed into something and you're getting bit. And you're it's just a matter of time before I catch a 7 or 8-pounder, right? And then you just never do. So St. John's is different because it's a tidal river. So to me, it's not your typical Florida fishery. There's a lot more options there, a lot of different ways to approach that place. But typical Florida lakes like Harris Chain and Toho, Kissimmee, Okeechobee, that's my answer, Kyle.
I've got a question for you as well. I'm gonna put you on the spot. You didn't hear the first part of the podcast where Kyle and I kind of laid out some names that we thought, there's a consistency aspect, a duration of competing at this level aspect that would make you, rookies can't necessarily be underrated because we don't quite know what they are yet because they've only fished 4 events. And so there's a couple elements that we factored into this. Who would you, because we always like to know, we always ask basketball players who's the GOAT because that's their sport and they play it. So I want to know what you think of your peers. Who would be someone that you would put maybe on par with you or in this discussion as well? If you see them as being, man, they are supremely talented and they haven't been talked about to that level yet, but it's coming soon.
I think I saw him tagged in that post, if I'm not mistaken, but Stetson Blaylock is probably the number one that comes to mind. Stetson's been doing this as long as I have. Him and I were actually co-anglers on the FLW tour for 1 or 2 of the same years that we did that. And we both moved over to the pro side roughly around the same time. I'm not sure exactly. Stetson's been in this game for, I'm going to guess, 14, 15 years as a pro. Absolutely one of the most consistent and versatile anglers out there on tour today. 100%. He always figures it out no matter where we are. He always figures out a way to survive even when he's struggling. And I think him and I are similar in the fact that we don't have a bunch of big tour level wins is a lot of the reason we're not mentioned very often. Like you said earlier, you win, everybody remembers first, nobody remembers second.
I really feel good then because both of y'all were my like classic picks. And so I was like, just for that reason, because it's so easy to want to pick a Hackney and a Swindle and a Christie and those guys because they've been successful for so long, and we just assume it's going to continue. But there is a new group, and you mentioned Stetson, and I'm waiting for his next victory so we can take him off the list because he has made, let me count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 of the last 18 Elite Series cuts.
Yeah, that's strong.
And Classic, obviously making the top 25 in the Classic. So you're right there with him, and I think that that's a great mark. Now, who's overrated? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to ask you that question. That's what everybody.
Hold on. Hey, hold on a second. Let me get my list. No, I'm kidding. I'm not getting into that. I'm not getting into that. Right?
That's for another time. That is the campfire version of the Inside Bassmaster podcast. But Matt, we appreciate you, man. And we mentioned, guys like Lester and Palmer and Mosley have all removed themselves from the list, in our opinion, and are properly rated. Or they're talked about a lot because of their recent wins. So all it's going to take is a win from Arey and a win from Blaylock, and they'll be one of those guys that will, in my opinion. Hey, I love them. They might have 10 more years in the elites. I don't know, but there is a generation of studs that have been on the elites since its inception that will have to pass the torch. And even though you're not much younger than them, you're not an old guy. You're not a super young guy. There's gonna be
you covered yourself there when you
there's
said
gonna be a good
hey,
you're not my wife. I can be honest with you on age. So there's gonna be a transition and a little bit of an overlap, and guys like you, guys like Stetson, the Brandon Cobbs, the Lesters, the Mosleys, and the Palmers of the world, they will be the next stars for a decade before they pass the torch over or somebody yanks it out of your hand. I hope you pass it rather than getting a yank. But
yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind word. Of all those names you just mentioned, I do think I'm actually the oldest.
Well, what are you? 44?
Don't worry about it. 43. Hey, 43.
43. Okay, good. Hey, you're the first one on the angler list. I can click it real quick and see your birthday. You had, so it's all good.
I can't lie.
Well, Matt, we appreciate you. And Kyle and I both, when I texted him, hey, do you think we should have these two guys on? He was like, they fit the bill 100%. So keep it up, and we will see you at Murray. You'll probably be on the short list there compared to other lakes, but we know you're one to be feared everywhere. So
appreciate it, guys. Always a pleasure.
Matt Arey, one of the, for now, most underrated anglers on the Bassmaster Elite Series, and we look forward to seeing Matt remove himself from that list, Kyle. Very, very consistent. Like you said, you pulled up his stats. I got him right here. Yes, we've paid over the last few years, we've paid through the entire field in 2019, and then we pay down to 70th in another year, and then we pay down to 64th, but for the most part, when you scroll his 55 B.A.S.S events, bunch of those are 5-digit checks. Those are $10,000 and up. So he made the cut to fish on semifinal Saturday in most of his tournaments. So we're kind of waiting for him to win one or win an AOY, something like that. But he's definitely been around the top 10 in the points race at the end of the year for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a lot, but I mean, you can't say it enough when you're having this conversation that it's all about perception. Because I mean, when you look at Matt Arey, it's not like he gets no recognition. I mean, that's probably not fair to say.
For sure.
But it's just a matter of like, the way people perceive things. And like, you talk about Stetson Blaylock. Well, like in my mind, he wasn't one of the ones I said because I hold him in such high regard as well.
He's off
Just
my list. Yeah.
growing up in Arkansas and everything and, following his career, I'm just like, same way as Ari, I'm just in my mind, I'm like, they have accomplished so much that like, I understand the public perception may be that they're underrated, but it's like, I view these guys so highly as it is that it's hard for me personally to say they're underrated because it's like, I think they're really accomplished. Like they have proved it for a long, long time.
And I think that that's now our responsibility is when an angler speaks up for another angler positively like that, but we've already moved him on to like properly rated, like one to be feared, that we now know it's our duty to continue to preach that to the world because they're obviously not seeing it like we know it. We assume it. He's on our short list, but if we're not saying it, others don't consider them maybe. And so Aries like another reassurance that we can promote some of these guys. We got one coming in, Brandon Card, like I mentioned, first ever college angler to qualify for the Bassmaster Elite Series, won Rookie of the Year in his first year. And that was back in the day where it was hard on the rookies. You come in and you do not have the immediate success of top 10 and AOYs because it was a lot less internet out there for people to understand, a lot less or a lot bigger of a learning curve at times. And so sneaking in, making the classic in his rookie season, and he's made a couple classics since then. Definitely one guy that was mentioned quite a bit. Brandon Card. Well, Kyle, we mentioned it. Matt Arey was our first guest. Brandon Card, our second guest. Both live in North Carolina. They're not North Carolinians. I'm still going to always refer to Brandon Card as a Tennessean. But Brandon, the question of the day for the podcast is, who's an angler that has a high level of talent? If there's 10 blocks, it's 8 out of 10, it's 9 out of 10, top talent, but maybe gets 2 or 3 on the spectrum of recognition. And a bunch of comments on social media came in, and you were a guy who was tagged quite a bit. And we started to kind of cipher through our definition of it. And there are a couple aspects. Duration, how long you fished professionally, that shows that you've been here for a while. A rate of good finishes. And then when you think about where that angler is going to do well, when you look at the elite schedule, it could be any of the lakes. And that tells me that they are good enough most places to be feared at all of them. So it actually makes our job harder for fantasy fishing because I don't know when to pick you because I expect you to do well in most of them. So how did that feel? I don't know if you saw my post, but all the people's comments about it, it's cool to be mentioned in that. And so what's your first thought about that?
Yeah, definitely humbled that I was mentioned in there. And I don't really, I don't think about it, much, but I mean, that was kind of a cool question that you asked the fans. After you mentioned it to me, I did go look at the post, and there was a ton of Matt Aries in there, a lot of Shane LaHughes. Which that's another North Carolinian. So there might be like a trend going on here.
Yeah, and go ahead, Kyle. You can go.
Well, no, that was one of the things we had talked about with Matt as well, and Ronnie posed the question was obviously, like Ronnie said, maybe not from North Carolina, but just that general region of the country. Like, can you attest, growing up fishing diverse body of waters and things of that nature to your, consistency across the Elite Series? Like, how big of a role has that played, like where you grew up fishing?
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head on that one. I mean, East Tennessee is where I grew up, and we have deep highland reservoirs like North Lake, which is my home lake. lots of smallmouth, largemouth, and spotted bass in that lake. And then if you drive, an hour and a half, southwest, then you run into Chickamauga, and there's grass everywhere, and it's just a totally different habitat. And then, Fort Loudon is more of a riverine fishery. It fishes more like a river. So yeah, I feel like guys in East Tennessee, and then thinking about North Carolina now that I live over here, the guys in North Carolina as well, we just have a lot of really diverse fisheries. And, I think that helps. That helps a lot, just traveling around the country and just trying to, figure things out, because every single lake in the country is different. And if you can find something just a little bit similar to what you're comfortable doing, then that's just like one step ahead as far as just, putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Brandon, how do you feel about your performance lately on the Bassmaster Elite Series? Obviously, coming in as the first ever college angler, and then winning Rookie of the Year, making some Bassmaster Classics, missing some Bassmaster Classics. But I don't want to be wrong, but I feel like you've made every classic since 2020. I think you made 2020 through this year. You've made every single one of them, so 5 in a row. From the time COVID hit to now. And yeah. I remember, and Kyle, you don't know about this, but Brandon will. I think that the consistency aspect of an angler is the deal, but great anglers are allowed to have stumbles and falls. And in 2022, I got to have a conversation with Brandon. He had 2 good events to start the year in Florida, made checks in both of them, made the cut in the Bassmaster Classic to fish the final day at Hartwell. And then he dropped a 75th at Santee Cooper, a 76th at Chickamauga, an 84th at Lake Fork. And the next event was Pickwick a few weeks later. And so he dropped his boat off at my house. And before he flies out, he's saying, man, I gotta figure this out, because I'm gonna miss the Classic, and I hate missing Classics. Well, then he turns around and makes
the Classic was in Knoxville.
Yes.
Classic was in Knoxville.
And you turned around and got a 29th, a 40th, a 27th, and a 21st, and made the Classic. So to see that struggle, mentally process, and then return to your consistent self, that's not easy. And we take it for granted when guys like you do that.
Yeah, that was a really stressful season, because I had missed the first Knoxville Classic, and so, I sat in the stands and watched Odd Defoe win that one, and worked the expo all 3 days, and like all of my childhood friends and everybody that I had ever fished around or in any of the tournaments in East Tennessee, like they're all like why aren't you fishing in this? Why aren't you fishing this? So I was having flashbacks from that one, and I was like, please don't let me miss another Knoxville Classic. And so I think it was maybe a little bit of just the nerves of it, after they announced it. But then, yeah, it's like some of them I can't even explain. Like Lake Fork is like probably one of my favorite lakes in the country, and I go down there and I get like an 80-something place finish, and I was just like, unbelievable. But yeah, I remember that talk that we had just like it was yesterday. I mean, it was just like, and then, but see, I actually thought it was going to be harder to make the Classic than it was. Like once I did the numbers, I knew it takes about 500 to 510 points every year. And I did my math, and I was like, man, all I have to do is average a 30th place finish the rest of the season. I was like, I can do that.
And you did it. And you did it on Pickwick, St. Lawrence, Oahe, and Mississippi River. That's 4 totally different bodies of water to try to rack some good finishes together.
Yeah, no, that's an understatement for sure. Yeah, like it was just every place was an animal of its own. But yeah, it's interesting. I guess this is my 13th season now in the Elite Series, and I feel like these last 5 or 6 years I've just been a lot more consistent, and I feel like a lot of that is just a better mindset on the water. I feel like the mental side of bass fishing is probably the most important aspect that really doesn't get talked about a lot. And I feel like, right now in my career, I'm the best mentally than I have ever been. And so I think that's maybe the reason why I'm a lot more consistent now than earlier on. I mean, heck, there was sometimes, you know, earlier on I would be like in contention to win events, and then the next two or three I would like finish in the 90s or hundreds and just all over the charts. And I remember my sophomore year, I had three top tens, and I still missed the classic. So that shows you how inconsistent I was. I mean, I may be the first guy to ever have three top tens on the Elite Series and miss the classic. So.
Well, you mentioned it there. I was going to ask the question before you even started talking about the mental aspect of it. But, you know, when Ronnie shared that story, the thing that instantly came to my mind was how difficult it has to be as a pro fishing the Elite Series to have a short memory. Like, it is so difficult to do that because the instant reaction of a fisherman is when you lose a fish is to think about it. When you have a bad finish is to think about it. Like, how hard is that to like remove those thoughts and just move forward and you know, like you said, keep a positive attitude?
Yeah, I think it's really hard early on. You know, the first several years when I would have a bad finish, it would just like tear me up and it would snowball. And, you know, you can see that with the results. And now I don't know if maybe I'm numb to it or just maybe just getting older and then, you know, kind of maybe putting priorities in line just as far as, you know, thinking about life and just, you know, I have a wife and a little boy now, and so it's like things like that mean so much more than fishing tournaments. And so I feel like when you have your priorities right, you know, you can kind of get your mind right a little bit better. Like when I was young and single, starting out on the Elite Series, like fishing was my life. Like I didn't have anything else. And so when I would have a bad tournament, it was just like the end of the world. You know, like now, if I have a bad tournament, yeah, it stings, but I mean, it's really not that big of a deal. You know what I mean?
That's what's so
Absolutely.
interesting when you said the mental game, and then like the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, you've been mentally better than before. There have been plenty of reasons for you to not be mentally stable during those times. We went through COVID in 2020. You not only then you had like you became a father, and then you had your condition, you know, over the whole, you know, from the fall of 22 through 23 season and stuff. Everything was coming Brandon Card's way. And you said you were at more peace and calm about that. And so have you evaluated, you sat back and evaluated like where that comes from?
Well, I mean, I think that the piece of just kind of going through those struggles, and you mentioned my facial paralysis and all that stuff that I went through last season. And, you know, I feel like that peace comes from the Lord, you know, and, you know, I just feel like as you get older and you mature and stuff, then like you really kind of grasp that concept. You know, when you hear your parents talk about the peace of the Lord when you're young and you're in high school or college, like, yeah, I mean, it sounds good, but it's like you don't really fully understand it. And especially when you have your first kid, I know you experienced that with your baby girl, and it just changes things, man. It's just like you see like Christ and the Lord like through these children. You know, it's kind of like the love that we have for our kids is the love that God has for us. And it really just changed my life. It really did.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I will flip the script now. We asked Matt Arey this question. I want to see if you accidentally duplicate his answer or not. But we like to talk to the athletes and ask them questions about other athletes, their peers. So who, when that question's posed and you saw who would you say this is a guy that has supreme talent that doesn't get the recognition he deserves, in my opinion, you know, in Brandon Card's opinion? When you're out there fishing, you're like, dude, that guy he catches them, and nobody knows he catches them.
Yeah, that's a good question. It may be kind of a hard answer for me to, or hard question for me to answer because I feel like the first several years on tour, I compared myself to other anglers a lot, and that's like the worst thing that you could do. Like as an athlete, you don't need to compare yourself to anybody. You just need to like work on your game and just get better. You know what I mean? Like focus on what you can do and like don't compare yourself to others. And so if you'd asked me that question when I was a rookie or sophomore, I would have listed, every guy around my age that was killing it. Ott, Polinick, all those guys. But now, like, I really don't compare myself to anybody else. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I feel like Matt Arey, is one. I mean, he's just super consistent. He's had some really high finishes. I mean, heck, he dang near almost won that classic that Hank Cherry won. I do think the fans are spot on with Shane LeHue. He's really good, but he doesn't like say a whole lot. He's a little bit quieter, and he just flies under the radar. And I would say maybe Austin Felix is another guy that kind of flies under the radar. Kind of quieter, sleepy assassin. I mean, heck, he got his first win obviously at Lake Oahe, but
And
he's
you
super.
led day one. You both were in that one. You were both did
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, the bad thing with me in that one is I really only had like one really good spot. And I thought I had some backup spots, but everybody else had found those backup spots. So
Well, there was quite a few people who had no good spots, so I'd rather have so you were ahead of the 8 ball there with one good spot.
that was a challenging tournament for sure.
No lack of water and no lack of wind in that tournament. I remember it definitely seemed like everywhere you went was a long ways away, and it was always windy, which was recipe for disaster as far as driving a boat's concerned. But
Yeah.
one thing we ask Matt, and I'll ask you the same question, is when you look at your angler page on Bassmaster.com, obviously it's hard to find outliers, like bombs or really poor finishes, and a lot of that, obviously, like we've talked about, has to do with consistency. But if you had to put your finger on like one style of tournament, for some guys, they don't like smallmouth tournaments. Some guys, they don't like Florida. Like, what is the style tournament or type of tournament that you still like don't feel the most comfort in?
That's a good question. I feel like it used to be northern smallmouth because they act totally different than southern smallmouth. Like the smallmouth I grew up catching in Tennessee, they're like the polar opposite of northern smallmouth. And like people that have never fished for northern and southern smallmouth don't really understand what I'm saying. But like down south, when it's like cloudy, windy, nasty weather, the smallmouth just get super active and they're like feeding on top and they're like crushing a spinnerbait. And up north, when it gets windy, cloudy, nasty, they get down on the bottom. And like the northern smallmouth get active, super active when it's like sunny and calm. And so it's like I could not like wrap my mind around that concept. It took me like years to just like if I had the instinct to throw something, I really had to throw the opposite of what I wanted to do.
I'm gonna burn this
And
chartreuse spinnerbait when it's flat, calm, and sunny.
yeah. It's like my instinct when it's flat, calm, and sunny is to like drag something on the bottom super slow, like a little finesse jig. And yeah, it's like they're like, I get back to the ramp. I remember my first year, our final event was Lake Oneida, and I get back to the ramp. I think it might have been after day 2, and I barely missed the cut. And Marty Robinson is like telling me about all these like giant smallmouth that he was catching on a walking bait, and I was like, dude, it's like bluebird skies. There's no wind or nothing. And he was like, I know, man, they were crushing it. And I was just like, how is this even possible?
So basically,
I feel like
you were saying southern smallmouth are basically just brown largemouth, the way they act.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. So I would say that used to be it, but now that I've kind of reversed my mind and the way of thinking on smallmouth, I do feel very comfortable smallmouth fishing now. But man, that took me several years to learn that deal. And honestly, some of those classics that I missed early on was because of my struggles up north, and so feel like that's really helped my consistency is just getting better at northern smallmouth fishing.
Yeah, you can scroll down on your angler page and see there's spurts of 3 or 4 events in a row without a check early in your elite career. Like you said, your rookie year, your second year, there's different moments where you're like, it all unfolded and unraveled there. But now when you scroll up, you're a grown man. You're no longer a kid, Brandon. You're an old guy. So now it's 10K, 10K, 20K, 10K, 10K, 0, 10K. It's a lot more highs than lows, even though your high expectation now isn't to just be on the elites, it's to win on the elites. And so, do you feel it's hard to project a win in your future, but do you feel like you're getting closer to developing what it takes to win an event, like knowing that I now know regions of lakes it should go down in, and it's all about timing for me and getting that right. And when I time it right, I'm going to be able to win an event because I have the ability. Like, have you walked that through your mind of like, when am I going to get a win? Is it Wheeler? Because I'm a good Tennessee River guy, but I also can fish up on the bank. Those different conversations you have with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like it's like you never really know, and I feel like a few times where like when the schedule would come out, and there was a few times where I would guess it, where I would be like, I really think I can do super well in that event. And I did that a couple of times on the Lake Fork events. I think I had 2 fourth place finishes at Lake Fork, and they both lined up perfect for what I like to do. And basically that was when the majority of the fish were spawning and shallow. And then I found like the first wave that had got offshore. And so those two lined up perfect. And I wish I could have capitalized on one of those two. But yeah, this schedule, honestly, the one that I really am looking forward to the most is Lake Murray, because last year at Lake Murray, I could have had a really, really good tournament. I just had a total train wreck of day one. Like it was just a nightmare of just trying to land the fish, just losing them. And then I came back. I caught a big bag day two, and then another 20-pound bag on day three. So I left that tournament thinking like, man, I would love to get another crack at Lake Murray. And so now I obviously I get the chance. We're a little bit later in the year, so those I was catching post spawners, throwing top waters and stuff like that last year, and so they're obviously going to be a little bit more conditioned because they've been fished for 2 or 3 weeks longer than they were last year. So they might not be quite as easy to catch, but I still feel like I could have a really good showing there. But yeah, just to answer your question, it's hard to guess like which tournament you're going to do well on. Like my best tournament ever was Texoma, and that was flooded conditions, and they were in the bushes, and I finished second right behind Greg Hackney, flipping bushes, and so it's like I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, exactly. That one fish came back and bit your walking topwater 4 times. That's why you started to probably feel in that moment, man. They're right. When you can't make them, like you can't lose them. You can't. It's going my way. Like you can't. I'm gonna win this tournament because this just no fish ever comes back 4 times and bites the topwater.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, especially that you were able to get in the boat with me.
That was cool.
So you were kind of like the fill-in videographer, because I think we only had 6 video video guys.
I think it was 5, and you started the day in 6th, and so
that's right.
And so then I came and jumped in, and I didn't have any earbuds, so I had to do this on the phone call, knowing when I was live. And I just remember the kink I had in my neck at the casino later that night for the hotel where we were weighing in. But Brandon, man, we feel like it's coming. We feel like something's coming good. You're fishing great during this season of time when you had plenty of excuses to just not have a good year. You had a great year last year, and so we expect more of that in the future. And I'm glad you said Murray. You're going to probably mess with my fantasy team now, because I wouldn't have picked you at Murray. And now I like, if I don't and you have a good one, I'm an idiot. If I do pick you and you have a bad one, you're an idiot. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But yeah. So Kyle, do you have anything for Brandon before we let him go?
I do not. Always a pleasure. Enjoyed it, and looking forward to seeing him in just a week.
Yeah, sounds good, guys. I appreciate y'all having me on.
Brandon Card, one of the most underrated Elite Series pros. Maybe we'll remove him from the underrated and he'll be properly rated very soon, Kyle. So, Brandon Card is great to talk to him. Yeah, we have a running deal. He can park his boat at my house anytime he wants. We just get to have a mental strategy session and work through the issue he feels in his game right now and why he's not doing well or why he is doing well. So very, very good to talk to Matt Arey and Brandon Card. Any thoughts about those two conversations before I pose the biggest name that could fit in this category that we hadn't talked about? I'm surprised. I'm surprised Brandon Card didn't mention Clifford Perch, one of his roommates. Such a stud for so many years, West Coast guy, which may be why he doesn't get a bunch of attention. He's quiet as well. But man, one of the OGs from the West Coast that's just freaking, other than the last year or two, one of the most consistent guys right up there. Like it's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% fact. And he's another one of those guys, when you look at fantasy fishing, pick him all the time in regards to like nobody else is picking him. I'm like, dude always catches them either here or just really anywhere, it seems like. But the topwater catch that from Brandon Card, that just sparked my memory, because I thought to myself, like, it's so weird how you remember like these old things, but like I feel like that was like the 3DB pencil, like Yozura's 3DB pencil went from like at that point, like pretty much nobody knowing about it, or like, I wouldn't say nobody, but like it being a undervalued bait, like for a walking bait, to like ever since that catch, for whatever reason, that bait has been far more prominent. And that I feel like in my mind, I could be so off, but like in my mind, that's where it registers to is Card on the final day at Texoma.
I can hear I can hear it from being in the boat with him. That was very, very cool. Thank God that fish bit 4 times because I was out of focus 2 of the 3 shots. I was hand camming it, trying to get the shot, not dropping my phone in the water, trying to listen to the phone call that were live, and then finally the 4th time he gets it, and he was panicking a little bit. He was like, "Oh my God!" And then he gets it, and he's like, "Yes, got him in the boat." And I was like, "That's another 4-pounder!" Like, holy crap! So. What a fun memory, and that just goes to show right place, right time, and being available, having the opportunity for Card's success there, for my opportunity to be a part of the show, and then it turns into where I'm at now. Same thing goes for you moving up in the world, just being available and desiring to do it gets you so many places, and so very, very cool. To end the show, I will pose a name, probably one of the biggest names in the sport, but it's only when one tournament comes around. We tend to not mention him otherwise, but he was in the comments quite a bit as well. Hank Cherry. When it comes to the Classic, properly rated, 2-time back-to-back Classic champ, one of the only guys to ever have 2, only guys to ever have back-to-back, almost, so close to winning 3. He was in the top 10 this year from day 1 to day 3. All 3 days he was in the top 10. And Hank Cherry was mentioned, but because there's no Elite Series wins, he's won an Open, he won the All-Star event, 2 Classics, big gaps into between, he won in 2012 in the Opens, he won the 2013 All-Star event, no wins, and then he goes 2020, 2021. He shows up in some of the big moments, and he's had really good finishes, but somebody commented that, and I was like, no, he's properly. Well, maybe it's like that girl in the meme, and she's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that I think overall he's probably underrated.
Yeah, no, I could certainly see that for the sole sake of like the Elite Series alone. He'd be another one of those guys that is very, very consistent, but like that consistency a lot of time goes unnoticed. Like you said, it's hard to say that from a certain perspective because of the Classic success he's had. When you win a Classic, like I feel like you almost like immediately get knocked off the board, but when you win 2, it's like you get so much recognition from it that it's hard to say. But just from the Elite Series standpoint alone, I think that certainly gets underrated, based on his consistency. And ironically, of course, like we've talked about, I hate to say so many positive things about your home state, but another North Carolina pro. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I don't know what it is about these Carolina pros that
Is Ronnie more underrated? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But yeah, literally, you think about the lakes that these guys grew up doing, have formed them into being consistent guys that travel well. And so it is very interesting. But it's the same thing. Like David Williams, not on the Elite Series anymore, but he's qualified for the Elite Series 3 times. He said no the first time. He's accepted the last 2. He's failed to requalify for the Elite Series a few times. And so he's not on the Elites currently. One of the best 3-day tournament anglers, whether it's an Open, a Toyota Series, an MPFL, like David Williams is a freaking stud. BFL. I don't want him showing up. Like, I met all these guys. Like, they're freaking good. And just something doesn't translate to the Elite Series. Otherwise, they could be one of the best anglers of all time if they just translated their local resume, which has transitioned to the 3-day semi-pro, regional national scene, to then the 4-day Elite Series. It's a different mind melt. I'm preparing to fish against, 102 studs, but man, there are so many good anglers from that region. And I do agree. Some of the funny takes, I'll say some rookies. I said rookies don't have enough time. They haven't had enough time. There were some comments that said, I think the Johnston brothers are underrated. And I said, I think you're crazy because we talk about them more than anybody probably. And they're pegged out on the top of talent and recognition. Jason Christie and Gerald Swindle were mentioned, and they're both, pegged out on how much we talk about them and their talent levels as well. Nobody said Greg Hackney, thank goodness, because I would have laughed so hard. Like, he is about as properly rated as you can be. Nobody mentioned Brandon Polinick, because I think that he is properly rated as well. I think everyone knows that, but it is. Some people could have taken the question the wrong way. There were some great answers there. Let me scroll through real quick and see if there's any I didn't mention that could be mentioned, but Schmidt was mentioned. We mentioned him a little bit earlier. Drew Cook was mentioned by 1 or 2 people. For sure, you had picked him out. Bryant Smith, I said it's still too early. He was a rookie last year, 2nd year, so you got to give him some time. Bill Lowen, I think that it says Ethan Shaw said Bill Lowen, he has some of the most consistent stats ever from the beginning of the Elites and just doesn't have the wins that others have. And I said, as soon as Bill won in 2021 at Pickwick, he kind of lost his consistency, honestly. Like, he was so consistent. Now he wants to win more, and so it's different. Somebody said Patrick Walters. I giggled at that because he is about as topped out in both categories as well. We know what to expect when he pulls up to the ramp. Somebody said Chase Sansom, and I said he honestly gets too much recognition and not enough talent. He's one of our boys.
No talent.
And Mark Menendez was a good one. I thought Mark Menendez was, for as long as he's been around, he is a staple. And I think that, yeah. So, well, Kyle, great conversation and a great question to ask. It makes us look down the elite list and think about more guys. Somebody mentioned a Todd Otten. Somebody mentioned Paul Mueller. I think Paul has been about as inconsistent as you can get, but man, he has shown flashes on different bodies of water, and whether it's the St. John's, the St. Lawrence, Lanier, Fork, Santee Cooper. Like, some of these guys, I don't know where to pick them because they do well everywhere. For Paul Mueller, I don't know where to pick him because I don't know when he's going to do well, because which Paul are we getting? So I have no idea, but great to see him. I think he was on camera at the Harris Chain this year already, and then Santee Cooper last year, and some other places he had a good, or he was, made the Classic after really going under the radar last year. He pulled it out at the St. Lawrence. So great conversation, and maybe one day we'll get maybe one day we'll do the overrated. I don't know. I think that might be a 3-hour spectacular we could go through there, but we should pose that. Have a fan come on. Do you think this angler is underrated, properly rated, or overrated? Now we'll let them answer. So we're
somebody who won't get in trouble regardless what their answers are.
Yes, we're not getting in trouble. Sweet. Well, Kyle, this podcast is going up Friday morning, day 2 of the Open at Logan Martin. And as it's going up, you are headed here to come host with us live. A reminder for the fans, Logan Martin, Bassmaster Live of the Opens, final day, 8 to noon Eastern time on Fox Sports 1, and then coverage, throughout the day on Bassmaster.com. We will see you there. That was your B&W Trailer Hitchers question of the day. Who's the most underrated angler?